Hmm.
GM, FOMOverse Radio. This is your show host, Austin Hambleton. Today we have a very special guest here today. Give it up for the one and only Dell.
Feels like a WWE intro. Like I like it.
Do you
I like
watch
it. This is my
WWE?
vibe. I used to watch a lot more of it than I do nowadays.
Who is your favorite
Yeah.
guy?
I used to like all the underdogs. Everyone who was terrible but was trying hard. So the Scotty Too Hotties and just mid-tier people,
Like
especially Chris
uh
Jericho before he became big.
like Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero? Weren't they a team?
Yeah, exactly. Forcibly for a while. Yeah.
I always like the
Yeah,
little
man, that's my vibe.
background like TVs that they have going on during the whole matches. There'll be like Vince McMahon getting his ass kicked backstage, and there'll be
That's the
like some
vibe.
some love affair going in the back, and then Triple H comes in. Love that stuff, man.
Once you figure out it's just a soap opera, then you start to want that stuff much more and embrace it.
You bring it into your IRL, and it's a good time. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Dell. Really appreciate it, man.
No problem. Um, yeah, I know that we prearranged this a long time ago, so I don't like to fall out of things I said I'd do.
You're a man of your word. We've made it. So,
Most of the time.
so you've been away, and I
Mm.
think it's important that everybody kind of takes their own time off, and self meditation and self healing are very important. If you want, go ahead and share. Just I know you've been away for a little bit. Tell us what's going on, man.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because in being away in this sphere, like because I've been told I've been away for a while. For me, that's like okay, a while, but it's actually been 3.5 weeks. Like it's not really been a large amount of time in relation to most artists and how they release work, especially in the contemporary world. Sometimes you'll have someone release a body of work and you won't hear from them for about a year or two while they work on the next body of work. Um, but yeah, long story short, yeah, I just let everyone know in February. I was just like, hey, there will be a time where I need to take some time for myself and to have enough of a gap between work so that I have the creative process work internally rather than feeling the incentive to make more stuff and pump more stuff out just because the hype is on me or the focus is on me. And so, yeah, it felt right. Um,
So,
but
some people were wondering if this was you when you tweeted this out June 8th, 2022. Is this you just creating NFTs from the sky, just watching the earth and
I like that
everybody
interpretation.
just
Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Um, yeah,
it's beautiful.
it's very much showing my mindset right now because I'm away and I'm a little bit doing stuff. I'm doing stuff, but my mind is still very much focused on things back on Earth, so to speak.
When in doubt, zoom out. Is that something
For sure,
that you should
for
apply to
sure.
your everyday lives?
I'm actually, if I'm honest, I'm actually a little bit more excited about the work I will be creating now, maybe more so than January, um, because things were too frothy. I don't feel like people were even looking at the work or discussing it.
That's a
And that's not just for
that's
me.
interesting.
That's for just artwork in general. People weren't really that involved in the discussion of the artwork, whereas I feel like now is probably a better time.
I've always felt like most people, I would say majority of people are into the NFT trading, to make a buck or two. Um, Some people
Hmm.
argue, oh, that's just a trader's mindset. Some people argue, oh, they can sell whenever they want to. Personally,
Hmm.
me, I really don't care. Last weekend I had Second State on the show, and we were talking
Hmm.
about how I even brought you up, Dell. I said, I really appreciate Dell because on the Profit channel in Discord, if you have, I think it was either bought or sold the token, you were included in that Discord channel. And I think that really brings up a good point. It's like the buyers and sellers are the one that are creating the market, and I
Hmm.
think people need to show a little bit more respect for both.
Yeah, they do, but I also feel like it's gonna figure itself out, right? Like things are a bit too new right now for
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
for us to see the nuance in between things. I I don't necessarily. I think there was a time period when that was the be all and end all. Um, Returns was the be all and end all, and now it's not. It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of discussions continue, and it might actually look a little bit more similar to when my entry into the NFT scene was when yeah, that's where I met a lot of people who are now considered OGs, like Second State and Jameson and Shorts was there and Strongheart was there, like where we were discussing the artwork and just having and it was much more about community. And that doesn't I'm not against people being here for, I'm not against anybody being in the scene for any particular reason. I don't really subscribe to that. Like, let's get the flippers out, let's get the traders out. I don't believe any of that. I'm just objectively saying things were different before, and I'm interested to see how things will be right now that the heat is turned down in the scene.
Well, the flipping and all the high volume and everything. I really feel like that brought a lot more people in. It brought
Hmm.
mainstream into NFTs. You've seen like groups and even like financial companies try to come in and acquire some of these assets. So I gotta give it to everybody for contributing to the space and where it is today, and just seeing it in the past 2 years. It's crazy. I was tweeting out to somebody. I can't. And I told them, back in January 2021, I always make like a New Year's resolution, like a New Year's wish. And my
Hmm.
wish was that I wanted to sell one of my NFTs for, 2x or 3x. Just
Hmm.
whatever. Just make a little small little profit. And no bullshit, like, I think it was either that month, January, or the next month after, I had make like 10x profits, 20x
Hmm.
profits, and I couldn't even believe it because like a month or two before, nobody was selling anything. It was like, you just had this, little cliche of people coming in buying certain artwork that appealed to them, and maybe they had a
Correct.
connection to an artist, or they just like their work, and then to see it grow from that to actually like increasing in value over time, it really just blew me away how fast things can really expand.
Yes. It, probably to its own detriment. The speed at which everything transpires is completely unsustainable.
Correct. 100%
Um,
agree with that. See that a lot.
yeah,
See that a lot.
yeah, it's it's interesting. It's interesting. Mm, yeah, I'm trying to not speak too much on it because I'm still figuring out my thoughts on it too. I'm still, yeah, I'm very mindful about sometimes I say things and they come across as sweeping statements. It'll be very interesting to see how everything plays out. I'm interested to know from your point of view too, like how you feel about everything.
So personally, I set myself up. in a pretty good position, as I just kind of explained, like early on. I was making good return early, and so I would cash some of it out, and then I would put some of it back in. And I have some mentors that early on I would follow Twitter, and we would chat a little bit. And there was this one big piece that I sold Mad Dog Jones, which I'm sure you guys talk. You guys had a drop together.
Hmm.
I sold one of his thought as a system right when they were doing the Mad Dog Jones
Mm.
burn. And so that really set it off for me as a collector. And I was like, I would say I was taking my time a little bit to look into stuff and then purchase. I mean, going back, I should have been a little bit more patient with what I was buying, but I feel like I set myself up pretty well. And seeing the market and the dramatic decrease in prices, to me, it's just a good opportunity for people to start a collection or add to their collection. I'm, I don't really feel any sort of negative way about it. Um, I think it could be a great opportunity. It just depends how you look at it. Other people are like, oh, down bad. And I like to have a positive mindset. And that's just how I look at things.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I'm very intrigued too because you're going to very quickly see which communities that appear in lulls and continuing when there is a lull. Those are usually the ones that the magic happens when things return anyway. I mean, I've been in crypto for a while now, right? And so I remember when ETH went to maybe $1,400 and then went back down to like I think the low might have been like 60 or 70.
Was this back in 2017?
Well, 2018 is when the peak. The 2018 was when the peak happened,
Okay.
right? Um, it was a very similar time to January of this year,
Hmm.
where people felt like they had figured it out. A lot of people felt like they had figured it out, and there was like, but the difference there was you had communities that were, quite frankly, a mix of profiteers and a lot of futurists. Effectively, that's what the space is going to invite, right? It was people who believed in the future of the technology almost to a fault, where it started to get cult-like, and coupled up with that were people who were
That's a ETH chart, by
in
the
it for
way,
the
but go ahead.
profit, yeah, people who were in it for the profit who slowly became futurists. But yeah, if you zoom into probably January of 2018, that's what that little spike is on the left hand side. Um,
Zoom into it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was when everyone figured it out. And when I say everyone figured it out, everyone in the
Right here.
space,
14
big
hundo.
yes, yeah. It was.
1437.
I remember that day very clearly because you also need to remember that 2 or 3 months before that, ETH was at $280 or something. So it was an exponential rise. But just before the peak, just before the peak, the conversation was everyone knew they were going to be millionaires. Everybody knew they knew they were going to be millionaires,
Oh yeah.
and
Obviously.
everyone was having a lot of conversations about what the technology would do, but it was predicated on mass adoption. Mass adoption. That was the whole thing. Like, yes, just mass adoption. Everyone's going to be doing this. We're the first, and then there was a huge sell-off, and which is what we call crypto winter. And I feel like but what's interesting is in between that time, 2018 and 2021, where the lull was, where, ETH basically flattened out and was bouncing around like $60, $100, whatever it was. That's when crypto art started to really do its thing. And
People didn't know we
if
were going to
you,
have a technical analysis on this show. Thank
yeah,
you.
exactly. But that's why I'm more intrigued in creating art now. Things aren't so hot because the people who networked in that time as crypto art became more of a thing, and it came from a very different place, you know. You have to remember like the currency that people were using to value their work at was at, not an all-time low, but a multi-year low. And people were still talking very positively about it. And there wasn't many people talking about it.
No.
Um, there wasn't many people talking about it. There wasn't masses of people in Discords and Twitter discussing this stuff. It was, I don't want to use the word purist, but believers.
So I want to say, Dell, that I first heard about Trevor Jones. That was the first
Mhm,
NFT artist I heard about. I
mhm.
want to say it was about August sometime, August 2020, right when he came out with Picasso Bull. That might have came out a month prior, but I didn't hear about it till after.
Okay.
It was on this guy's show, Jason Williams Going Parabolic. He's a
Mm,
pretty intelligent guy, business guy.
mhm.
Anyway, so I heard about Trevor Jones, August 2020. Looking at the chart right now on Ethereum, the high for August was 486, and then it's crazy. Just a few months after, when I made the New Year's wish, you just see ETH just spiking up crazy. And I want to say, like right when 2021 was popping off, is when NFT trading started becoming a real thing. I mean, I'm sure
Mm.
people were doing it, prior to when you were saying, but I think all these projects every single day you just hear about like 30 to 40 different projects and
Mhm.
Bored Ape this, Fat Ape that. I mean, I love Bored Apes, but everybody was doing like rip-off projects and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is not going to end well." I mean, look at where the most of those PFPs projects are now, the rip-offs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the difference with this whole situation is it's so linked to monetary gain that it's really difficult to see things clearly. So if we talk about like how art has manifested itself digitally, it's been a wave of like this is the big thing, this gets big, and then it hits a peak, and then it falters, and then there are people inside that who go on to benefit from the next rise of the next thing, and we can look back as far as something like Newgrounds. So Newgrounds was a website that allowed people to make their own animations by the software Flash, basically. There's Flash animations, and it's really interesting because there wasn't really any monetary value linked to the success of your animations on that. It was effectively another example is DeviantArt. It's a massive platform that allowed people to upload their own creations for nothing more than just the attention of the consumer, right? There wasn't any monetary value linked to it.
It was just like
But
creating your own GIF, pretty much.
well, Newgrounds was different
Okay.
because you could have full length, 4 minute long cartoons.
Okay.
Um, but many of the people who did extremely successfully on that went on to after the death of Newgrounds, that those individuals went on to other successful things. Like some of those people who were, teenagers making their own cartoons went on to become um, creators at Pixar, or now they're pitching their stuff successfully to Netflix, their own cartoons. A lot of the time you're going to see stuff like what's on Netflix now, like Love, Death, Robot.
This must have
Is
been
this
relatively like old. Like what is this like?
old? Yes,
Like
I'm going to
what
take you through
years? What year are we in now?
2003, maybe
Okay, going
2004
back
is
to is
when.
that dial-up
Yeah.
days
Mm,
or a little bit after?
depending on what part of the world you were in. Yeah, it was kind of the crossover point of dial-up to 1 megabyte broadband.
Whew.
But there were people who were making their own games there too. Newgrounds had you could use Flash to make your own video games, and it was the precursor to what we now think of as the early iPhone mobile games. So,
Oh.
so if you think of like Flappy Bird, for example, um,
Here's Newgrounds
that
2003.
there was hundreds of kids making games that looked exactly like that back then. But then what would happen is they would subsequently go on to um, uh, found or become part of animation groups, or they would go on to use their skills to make app games, which then they got the monetary value from. So um, these people would go on to find success after the death of a platform. And so that's something I've seen common methods before. DeviantArt went through a very similar thing. So DeviantArt had a platform where people could post up their own artwork, their own paintings, and there was for many years no way to profit off your creations, just like Newgrounds. And then the the change was when people decided to stick with it, although DeviantArt started to falter. So there was a peak when DeviantArt was the only place you could go to. It was the main hub you could go to receive artwork. And Newgrounds was the same. It was the main place you could go to for like indie video games or indie animations that were frankly quite primitive. And DeviantArt went through a similar thing where, at its peak, a lot of people were making quite primitive art, but because of their viewer base, they would stick with it and improve. And what would ultimately happen was when the focus came off these platforms, there were a bunch of people who made a decision that, like, okay, cool, the heat has come off this now. I'm going to slow down and stop doing what I'm doing. I'm going to focus on other things. There were a selected few who, despite the fact that the heat was gone and no one was paying as much as attention to it, decided to continue working on their things. And many of those people in DeviantArt who had these huge groups would go on to find other outlets. So they would be like, okay, cool. Some people are posting their art now to a thing called Facebook. I'll just make a Facebook page and just post my art there. Okay, now they've made a pages where people can be my fans or whatever. Oh, cool. Now there's this new thing called Instagram. I'll post my art there. And you have to remember at this time, there was no profit from it because DeviantArt, even though you're painting and posting your work, there was no way to sell your work as prints for many years. So this was just for the love of it. And then a few people who had the massive DeviantArt following stuck with it and continued took their fan base from DeviantArt to Facebook to Tumblr and then subsequently to Instagram. And then two things happened that massively changed things for those people who continued to make art when things were low. Two platforms came out. The first one was Kickstarter, and the second one was Patreon. And so now, for the very first time, if you manage to continue to hold your following of 10,000 people, or for some people, hundreds of thousands of people, you had an avenue to turn that into profit. A perfect example of that is an artist called Loish. So if you,
How do you
I
spell
think
that?
her Instagram is actually Loisvb. Yeah, I think it's Loisvb at Loisvb.
Okay, pulling it up right now.
Um, and so this is someone who like played it out exactly as I said, had the fan base initially from DeviantArt, and then just kept on going for years, painting and drawing, painting and drawing, painting and drawing. And ultimately, there became an avenue for them to find profit, and that was Patreon. It was basically, hey, do you guys want to support me? You're happy to support me. Like, you could just pay like $5 a month, and you get access to all my like art, my work in progress. I will show you tutorials and step by steps of how I do all this stuff. But
Wow.
interestingly, because this person decided, this girl decided to never stop. Um, the moment Kickstarter, I think she did a Kickstarter book too. The moment Kickstarter and Patreon came out, she had almost 1 million followers. And so she went from I'm a broke artist who just loves to draw and paint for my fan base to I never need to work again because I've released my stuff on Patreon and Kickstarter, and 250,000 people have supported me.
Wow, this is
And
insane. This looks like something off of a Disney movie. I'm serious.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But what's really interesting is this is the first person I really saw, or one of the first people I really saw that did what is happening now in NFT, where they're just making what they want and they don't have to work for anybody.
That's quite a
The
bit of likes
I
on
guess
here.
yeah,
86,918 likes.
for sure. I mean, I have no idea how many followers she has now, but I know it's like probably the most followed artist on Instagram. Perhaps probably in the top 10, I suspect.
You know what's crazy
And
is I'd never even heard about this girl, so that'll tell you how much I know versus you.
no, but that's why I used her name, because
Wow.
I know most people don't are completely unfamiliar with her. But so the reason I'm kind of going around the story is that I can name a few people who went through this path where they continued to make, and while things were not hot, or there was no direct return, and then something happened, and then subsequently they became like a big thing. But I guess the difference here is the only supporters who directly are benefiting from this are the ones who maybe bought the first early prints Lois released, or maybe the early Kickstarter when the fan base wasn't as huge. So I'm very intrigued to see what will happen when you have a digitally crypto native artist go through this, where they sold their stuff and it was looking good, and then there was a big dip of focus and attention and, quite frankly, community. And they continue to do things and continue to create. And then when everything comes back, whether that community will be the first to benefit from that return, as opposed to just the individual artist. Yeah,
The
did
diamond
what I say
handers.
make a lot of sense? Yeah,
The
exactly.
diamond
But
handers.
not just the diamond handers though. It's people who just were there or gonna be there anyway because they're just like, I just value this stuff, you know.
Sure.
Um,
Or you just
I
like
just
it. You know, you
yeah,
just
I
want to
just
have it.
exactly. I just like it. I just want to
Yeah.
have it. And I don't feel like we have seen that yet. The closest we've seen to that is, I guess, the people who bought X Copy's work early, um,
Oh,
when it
like
was like
rare,
$20.
some super rare stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And so,
I feel
yeah,
like
I'm
he was
intrigued
one
by
of the
that.
first artists on one of those platforms. Was it Known Origin?
I believe
I
so.
think he
Yeah,
was like
non
the first
origin
artist
and
on there. So I have some
Mm,
community questions for you, Dell.
sure.
These are asked out of the Fomoverse Discord, which, if you have Fomoverse, you can verify on Discord and have Fomoverse chat. So we kind of got together, and the community has some questions for you. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna ask. The first one is by Offrin, and he asked Dell, "What's your favorite era in art history?"
Yeah, that's really difficult. I don't know if I have a favorite era in art history, which is a non-answer. Um,
That's okay. Do you have like
yeah,
maybe a couple that like come to your mind just right off the bat? Maybe not your favorite, but just what do you think of?
probably Paleolithic era art because the idea of making art when art wasn't a thing, that seems like almost insanity to me. Because I think, and it's not like I'm not just saying that just to be like quirky, but you have to understand these people were making art when art didn't exist. Every piece of art that you look at is an imitation of some art that's existed before.
Would this be
Currently, well,
like
even if you're a photographer,
Egyptian art, or like even
no,
before then?
Paleolithic art is like, you know, just after dinosaurs. Like
Oh,
this
the
is
Stone
like
Age.
caveman shit.
The Stone
Yeah,
Age.
like super super ancient art. You know when they go into like a cave and they see like anatomically correct bison and shit like that.
So, and this follows up with the question I'm going to ask. Do you think that these Paleolithic kind of era art, the reason they did this could be maybe they wanted to leave behind something for the future generation and put it in stone and just make it their mark? And maybe it's
Well,
something that they want it to be recognized as?
that's how I see it because I mean, what we see when we like Google Paleolithic art is kind of the sexy stuff, the animals and the abstractions of um things we kind of recognize. But most Paleolithic art was handprints. It would be you put your hand up against the stone and you spit spray the red dye onto the stone, leaving an
Here
an
we go.
outline
Here we
of your
go.
hand.
So right up to
Yeah.
the left.
So for me, that's like just to be like, oh right, cool. That hand is 40,000 years old, and we still see it now. I don't. I know for sure I'm not able to create anything that lasts that amount of time. I'm not really interested in creating a body of work that lasts 40,000 years. But the idea that some message carries, even it's, and you had not necessarily been in a situation where this was a commonplace thing to do, you know, that shit's just wild to me. Yeah, that's just wild to me.
Could this be a sign of the bull returning? You see the bull right there?
Perhaps, perhaps.
They're telling us something.
Yeah,
They seen
perhaps.
this coming before we did.
And you have to also consider too that when we think of like art throughout the era, the reason for creating the art often starts to become linked to people outside of ourselves, right? So if you look at like medieval art, it's very much linked. Well, I should say Western medieval art. It's very much linked to um, Christianity and Islam, basically taking over our society in so many ways. Like or I shouldn't say taking over society. That's what society was. It became very religious based. And so it's very much linked to other people, making art that other people recognize you for being linked to what is important in society. It's like, I'm going to make illustrations of these religious things or these religious events, and I will link every event to a religious event. So you'll see battles um, that would become religious events because they were, these are entitled the Crusades. Um, and then Renaissance art was a little bit of the same situation afterwards, where it's just like, okay, we're making stuff that is linked to society and how society sees us. And neoclassicism was like very much linked to the upper class, the higher class, and being quite frankly, neoclassicism as an art form is just Instagram. It's how can I depict myself in the way that I want everyone to see me? And then basically you just have all of these art movements that are kind of a way of you trying to influence how other people see you or your importance. It wasn't really like your view of the world. It was making sure other people perceive you as linked to what's important. Whereas if you go back to, yeah, like prehistoric art, I'm like, what was I want to know. I'm like, what was you thinking when you did? What is your purpose here? What's going on? Why did you put your hand there, knowing that maybe only your immediate tribe might see it? What's going on? What's happening? Um, Whereas, yeah, later and later it became more about, yeah, more and more audience. It was more audience derived. Um, but yeah, if we're just talking about like what art looks sexy as well, like a lot of the time, art movements are just a response to the art movement that came before it. So if you look at artwork like um, there's an art movement in the 1500s called Mannerism. So it's you've seen it before, but if you look it up, you because you probably don't know the name, but if you look at Mannerism art, it's a bit like it's a bit colorful, but it's trying to play everything up, right? It's like colors are a little bit richer, and you everything's very clear to see, and you're and then there's a following art movement that came after it, called Baroque art, and it was like a response to Mannerism art. So you had like the colorful image that shows everything all at once. You see every one in the family all
Oh,
at once.
that is beautiful right there. Holy
And then
cow.
Baroque art became like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to make everything so atmospheric, like supremely atmospheric. Much of my personal work, if I'm honest, like the work that you think of when you see like Dell NFT, trying to take some things from Baroque
I could
art,
see that.
and then but it's like there's a lot of flourishes. But then if you look at someone like Caravaggio, if you like type in like Caravaggio and look at Caravaggio's art, that was like very late Baroque art, and it's almost goes the opposite way of colors,
Oh,
where it's just like, oh, my response to mannerism is I'm going to show you what to do with shadow. In fact, I'm going to make this image 85% shadow, but you're still going to get all of the emotion as if it was the mannerism art where we show you all the angels at the same time. Some characters are literally just an arm, a shoulder, and the side of their head is in light and nothing else. And you feel their intention, you know. And so,
do you teach
yeah,
like art
that's
history? How do you know all this
no,
stuff leading
no,
up
no,
to
no,
where
no,
we're
no. I
at?
don't teach it. Yeah, I don't teach. I don't teach art history. That
Oh,
would be a
here's Dave
terrible idea
Polat.
for me to teach art history. um, yeah, art. I just really love art. Like for real. It's just, I just really like it. But then, then you had Baroque art, and then everyone was trying to imitate Caravaggio. And then the following art movement is kind of like Rococo art, which kind of happened at the same time, actually. So you had Rococo art, um, a little bit as a response to Baroque art getting really popular, where people would be like, no, let's bring the colors back. Let's make like everything really light blue and really light green. And there's no shadows. Shadows don't really exist. Only darker versions of other colors exist. And so basically what I'm saying is these art movements that would come like 50, 100 years at a time.
Well, what would you say the catalyst is? Why would they move over to something better? I mean, I know people try to reach for something better, but I mean, who's to say like which one's better than the other? I mean,
it's because that's how a lot of taste happens. It's usually a response to a taste becoming saturated or being around for too long. So if you think about how cars looked in the 60s and 70s, like popular vehicles in the 1960s or 1970s, their current sports cars, like a 1970s muscle car, like
look at that.
The aesthetic it's really interesting because as much as people might be like, yes, that is aesthetically pleasing, it's actually breaking all the rules of what we think of as a modern sports car. There are a few other reasons for that. Like we started to realize that aerodynamics had a thing to play, but you often have waves of movement where something gets really saturated and then the response thing starts to become very popular. So,
you're talking about trendsetters.
It's not just trendsetters, because when people set trends, they're often not trying to. And so you often have situations where something will play out and reach its pinnacle and people almost get sick of it, or it starts to lose its taste. It starts to lose its punch. It happens in music faster, but I think it will happen in NFT too. The only problem is with NFT is it's so profit based. It starts to muddy what taste is. Like I don't know if taste actually goes before profit, because people aren't necessarily chasing something for taste reasons, which is why I'm not really sure it's a good idea to develop in a bull market. It's actually better for you to develop in a bear market, because people who are interested are more linked to taste than they are to returns.
I like that that perspective.
Every art movement has been like that too, by the way.
It's what, like every 50, 100 years, 200 years?
Dude, it's been getting smaller and smaller,
Wow.
You have surrealism in the early 1900s, and then abstract expressionism came like 30 years later. Before it used to take hundreds of years.
So then you have 50s art, 60s art.
Yeah, I mean, and contemporary art is like everything just from the 70s onwards. And I don't even know what modern art is now. Like, I actually don't know what we.
Let's see what Google thinks it is. Modern art. There's just what Google.
Even that term, modern art, like I've heard people use the term modern art to describe art from the 1950s and 60s.
Oh, yep. See. Look at this stuff right here.
So I don't know what current art is even like, if there is even an accepted genre. NFT seems to be the nearest thing to something you can kind of have an expectation of what you're looking at, but it's too many different things. It's
all over the place.
It's not an art movement. Yeah, absolutely.
So next question here I got for you, Del. Thank you for going over different eras and what's
I'm ranting,
up.
dude. These aren't good answers. This is ranting.
Oh, you're
I'll be
that.
careful.
That's what we do
I'll be
here.
careful.
That's what we do. Okay, second question is from Woot. He's in our FOMOverse. What are your plans if there is a prolonged bear market? Does anything change for you in terms of what to release and when?
Say that again.
What are your plans if there is a prolonged bear market? Does anything change for you in terms of what to release and when?
No, if anything, um, I'm not interested in releasing when capitulation hasn't happened. So I don't think it was a good idea to release over the last 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks because everyone's so focused on everything going down that they're not really able to release their emotional state from things. But like I said, when things start to sell, that's when I think I'm probably going to release some of my best work
Okay.
because I'll be able to release so much fewer work.
You're looking for more like
Uh,
a stabilized emotional market. People aren't,
correct,
looking at the top, hey, we're going further, or, oh, we're
correct.
still going down. You're just looking when the dust settles. That's when Dell's gonna come in and spit fire.
Basically, yeah. Basically, I'm just waiting for stability. Um,
Waiting for
and
stability.
I'm really lucky in that I'm not necessarily linked to uh, the scene enough to for it to be my be all and end all. I didn't. I don't depend on the scene for my income. I really am happy to just continue working on creating stuff and engaging with the community.
And I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that, including me myself. I've noticed how people will ask you questions in your Discord and or on Twitter, and you're there like, hey, yo, this is what I think, or go here. This is what I would think. This is what I would do. So I really appreciate you being very attentive to everybody. I know we can't always expect that and ask that of you, but thank you.
I don't mind.
Third question is from Brothers. Will Dell do one of ones?
Yeah, I'd much more interested in doing one-on-ones when things settle for sure. Much more interested in doing one-on-ones. I think doing one-on-ones when things are quiet is way better.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, can't wait to see that one of one.
Yeah, I have a few pieces that I'm not really sure the order in which they'll release, but I'm very much I'm much more interested in releasing work now, which I think I've mentioned this before. I'm much more interested in releasing work now that definitely have an emotional response. And my next series of work will do that. And I think one of the pieces fits so well into an emotional response that's unique that it probably needs to be a one of one. Yeah.
To follow up with that statement, are you thinking about doing something unique for this one of one? Maybe something that people haven't seen before? Maybe it changes a certain way, or maybe you can't disclose that?
Yes, ish. I think my work's always going to be able to convey something that people recognize it's probably Adele's work.
Hmm.
Um, so if you think about my last three pieces, so yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to um,
Where do you want to go back to?
I'm just thinking, let's go back to my most recent work is that's released with Virtus and Valor.
You know what? I already got it pulled up. I was thinking you were going to bring that up.
So as a body of work, this could have easily have been a one of one, but there were reasons why I felt like no, it shouldn't be. Actually works better not as a one of one. But um this one was very much tied into the way the market looks now. In that patience is actually greed a lot of the time. Like it's risky. It's actually risky. And so there was an emotional part of this piece that was it had a reveal. I wanted a piece that had a reveal, which is why in the middle of the piece it zooms out and you can see the sword. But I also wanted motion to be much more a part of the piece too. So this is a natural progression of the work that came before, because my earlier work didn't have any physical movement. Like the fact that wind is even a part of the work, that's quite a new thing.
That's beautiful. And the sword.
And,
I can't remember what you said. You said something what the sword is resembling.
well, the sword is a metaphor, and it's not my metaphor. It's a parable from history, basically. It's called the Sword of Damocles, which is like a story from the 1800s. It's a bit of an apocryphal story. So the idea is that you had one of the king's courtesans and saying just how much they really admire the king, and I think the courtier was saying like, "Oh, it must be great to be king, right? You have all of these great things. You have all of the best food. You have all of these attendants, and you're surrounded by these wonderful gardens. It must just be lovely to just have this this life, being the king." And the king, but by the way, the courtier was called Damocles, and so the king Dionysus basically was just like, you know what, I could give you an answer, but what I should say is it's not what you think. So the only way you're going to get this is for you to be king for a while. And so he orders Damocles to be king for I think just one day, and sit in the throne. And Damocles was like, "Oh, this is amazing! I get to be king." I'm shrinking this story right down, by the way. And
This is a short story
he,
of what actually happened.
yeah, and he experiences all of the great foods and wines and serviced by all of the great attendants. But before Dionysus actually allowed Damocles to take the throne, he ordered his attendants to place a sword above the throne, held only by a single horsehair. So you couldn't even see the horsehair. That's how thin it was, and it dangled above the throne. And once Damocles spotted the sword, he just had a massive amount of impending doom, like come over him, and he completely lost his taste for food, and he just didn't want to be king anymore. And Dionysus was trying to explain to him like the more power you have, the more vulnerable you become to enemies because you become more of a target. And so the more you gain, the higher the risk. And so it's not just easy being the king, or it's not just easy being the one who has a bountiful amount. And that's a lot of what the work was about, like us being in love with the idea of gaining all of these virtual riches or appreciating them and spending more time with them. But for every second that passes, that's more time that the sword of Damocles is hand over your head. And you could argue that the Sword of Damocles is just a metaphor for bear market.
Hmm. And you know what? I believe you dropped this sword right before the bear market, right? I mean, what?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes, exactly. It's
May 4th,
because
right?
just before things got rocky.
Right.
Um,
Did you see
hey,
something coming? Was there some indicator that led you off? I mean, you since you've been gone, everything has gone down, and I'm starting to wonder. I mean, you must have knew this before everything happened. What are
I
you?
suspected
Are
it.
you
I
like? Are
just
you looking
yeah.
into a crystal ball? I mean,
I don't think it's. I think in hindsight it was more obvious than it people are making out. You know, I think in hindsight it's much more.
what was the
You had
top?
to.
What was the top indicator for you?
Hmm. It's a good question because there was about three things where I was just like, I think it's time to. I think it's time to get the sort of the Macle's work out, and I think it's time for me to take a step out. But one of the key things for me was um, you had massive projects releasing their third or fourth pieces or bodies of work that were hitting crazy highs, but the turnover was too fast before they got to a high. Like it was like, okay, cool. You're releasing, Yuga Labs' fourth project or whatever it is, but the amount of the amount of returns happening that small of time is so unsustainable, and nobody was talking about art anymore. Nobody was talking about the visuals anymore. And I don't think even PFPs had that beforehand. People would talk about which ape they liked the look of. Even when things were crazy, they would still be like, I really like the way my guy looks. But then it turned into, what trait does this have? Which just was just very like it was a big deal for me, and I'm really at an advantage too. I have an entire community, and I could see that there were people entering the community who were only asking one question. So if you weren't in the Profits channel, which is the channel that's um created for holders of probably my rarer pieces and earlier pieces, and you only saw the Connect channel, there was two completely different conversations going on. The people who were there quite early were much more engaged with each other, and the discussions weren't so focused on returns. But then there was a period of time where only people were talking about returns only.
Sometimes we would get to talking about cars on your channel there. I remember there was a couple times on Discord we were talking about cars, and uh,
Yes.
I think you came in and you're like, "Is this like a car channel now?"
Yes. But
so,
I liked that. I
so,
liked that
so
because
some of
that's
us
what
are
true
in
community
the
is.
a lot of us actually I think are in the car business that I
I've
know
noticed.
that are in your chat and live pretty closely, like in the same state even.
I don't know how that happened, but
It's so funny.
it was truly organic. I didn't set that up.
So I'm trying to set up a Dell get together just for the people that are in Colorado that I've talked to that are in the collectors channel. So we're supposed to be doing that soon. I touched base with I think his name is like Rich Scott Papa or something like that,
Mhm.
and it was funny. He made the comment. He was like, "Why? So we can just talk about how down we are on all of our NFTs?" And I was like, "Yeah, basically. Like, what else do you think
Yeah.
we're gonna do?" It was just funny. So that's coming
Yeah,
soon. Mid
We've
soon.
never seen an NFT bear market before as well. Not a real one. We've never really seen an NFT bear market.
What about like I think it was it like mid 2021 or late 2021 when like a lot of NFTs like spiked down for a little bit but then like came back up like really quick.
It felt like a correction more than a bear market
Yes.
because it didn't last very long. Volume went down, but prices still was going up.
Correct.
Mm.
I'm going to ask you one more question, Dell, and then we
Mm.
will wrap it up. We are topping right over an hour here. Okay, last
Yeah.
question is
Okay.
from the FOMOverse. Bit Savage. Will you shift to a multi-chain approach moving forward? Create art on a few top chains or stick with Ethereum and continue to build how you see fit?
Um, I just don't care about like chains enough to have an answer for that right now. I'm way more focused on what art I'm going to create. I'm way more focused on what I'm going to create. Yeah, like I could force an answer right now, but
No, you're good.
I feel like I'm on the precipice of making art that I'm like, oh shit, I really want to see this myself now. And yeah, however it plays out is however it plays out.
Well, thank you so much for the time we had on here, Dell. I really appreciate you showing up on here and answering some questions from the FOMO community. You got anything for anybody, or we wrap it up?
Um, yeah, I'm not back yet, but I will be soon.
So,
Yeah,
so hear
I
that,
will be
guys. He
soon.
will be away, but we got him for a little bit. So, thanks
Yeah,
for popping your head back in, brother. We really
no
appreciate
problem,
you.
man. No problem. Yeah, you're gonna have to forgive me as well for going through all the boring art history that no one asked for.
Oh no, we love it. That's why we're here listening to you, man.
Okay.
Well, take care. Enjoy. Congrats on the move, because I think you recently made a move. So congrats
Hmm.
on that, and um, keep doing what you're doing, man. We love you.
All right, thanks for giving me some of your time, Austin. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely, Dell. We'll talk later, man. Take care.
Yep. Take care. Bye.